Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about what to do if you don't have a summer job yet. So don't panic. We're going to be talking about 1Ls and 2Ls, so stay tuned. Your Law School Toolbox host is Alison Monahan, and typically I'm with Lee Burgess. We're here to demystify the law school and early legal career experience so that you'll be the best law student and lawyer you can be. Together with the co-creators of the Law School Toolbox, the Bar Exam Toolbox, and the career-related website Career Dicta. I also run the Girls Guide to Law School. If you enjoy the show, please leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can always reach us via the contact form on lawschooltoolbox.com, and we would love to hear from you. With that, let's get started. Welcome back to the Law School Toolbox podcast. Today we're talking with ex-BigLaw recruiter Sadie Jones about what to do if you don't have a summer job yet. And we're talking about both 1L and 2L situations. So welcome, Sadie.
Thanks for having me back.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for joining us. So to start off, the situation is pretty different for 1Ls and 2Ls, right?
Yes. I would say either way, don't panic. But a lot of 1Ls don't have jobs yet at this point. You know, some do who kind of, got a jump start on the December 1st deadline where things open, but a lot of people are still looking for jobs. 2Ls are in a situation where they need to find something quick.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right. I mean, if you're a 1L, this is pretty normal. If you're a 2L, I think at this point, you've got to be starting to take this sort of seriously.
Yeah.
And I mean, the thing is, for a 1L, you just need to find something that's kind of legally related that you can talk about in your next round of interviews. But if you're a 2L, well, you need to find something that's ideally related to what you want to do, right?
Yes. And I think if a 2L gets in a situation where it's going too far, they should think about it kind of like a 1L does, and they just need to find something. But I think there's still enough time right now where they, should be trying their best to find something that's in the area, location, that they're interested in. And they can, I think they still have time to do that.
Right. Okay. Well, let's start with 2Ls because I think that's a little bit more of a urgent type of situation. So what should they be doing right now?
Networking. I think is the most important thing. I think they should be talking to career services. I think they should be making a list of anyone they know and try to do informational interviews or have coffee with people. Do anything they can to get their name out. See if there are still any career fairs that might be open to 2Ls. I would just be sending out resumes. There are still places, that maybe didn't fill their summer class, didn't find the right people already. So I would just be, really running full steam ahead at this point with any options.
I think that's right. I mean, one of my first steps would be to suggest making an appointment with your career services office so that you can find out, what resources can your school offer you. Have you fully used these? I mean, if nothing else, they can look at your resume, they can look at your cover letter, they might hear about things that come in. I mean, as I think you've mentioned before, from the BigLaw perspective, sometimes firms might call a school if they need to fill a class. And, you want to be that person that has been proactive and that has gone in and been nice and talked to people. And they're like, oh, yeah, I do remember that Allison was looking for something. Let me put you in touch. That's the kind of thing that you need to happen right now.
And I think you should ask them for any feedback or I think it's a good time to evaluate why you're in this situation. Did you just not apply enough or, get yourself out there? Did you switch which direction you were going? Or is it that there's issues with your resume, your documents, your grades, your interviewing style? I think this is a time for real self-reflection so that you can make any adjustments. I mean, there's some things you can't change. You can't change what your grades are. But I think you can change kind of how you're marketing yourself.
Oh, for sure. And I think it's also probably a time to be realistic. If you struck out at OCI and you didn't get the job that you thought you might get, and maybe there's a reason for that, maybe your grades really weren't there, that kind of thing. But I think this is the time that it's easy to be defensive and say, oh, well, this happened or that happened. But really, you've got to be realistic and say, okay, what am I actually qualified for? Who's likely to hire me? And how do I find out where those jobs are? Which is going to take, it's going to take time and energy. So you've got to start devoting regular time and energy to this project.
Yeah, and I think that can be hard, when you're also in school and trying to balance those things. But I think you sort of have to keep your eye on the goal, which is that you're in school to get a job. So Exactly. You can't neglect this part of it. And I think that does happen to some students.
Yeah, the 2L year is also difficult because you've got journal stuff and you've got, a bunch of things going on. But this is a critical item that you need to be devoting time and energy to. Yeah, you mentioned, informational interviews. I think those are always great. There may be some job fairs, like public interest stuff, diversity things that you could go to and should go to. Your bar association may have events or may have a job board or something like that. And I think often overlooked is, small firms that might need somebody. And they probably are not on a hiring plan, that's super early. So they might just be starting to think about like, oh, it'd be great if we could get a 2L law student for the summer to help us out with these projects. So those are harder to find, but I think that's where those informational interviews and that networking can really come in handy.
Yeah, and I think you need to really make sure your attitude is in the right place. Like you want to get a job, you will do anything to do it. You're very motivated, enthusiastic about everything. I think you really want to convey that to any employer,
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. You don't want to be that person who's like, oh, I struck out at OCI. Now I have to go talk to all these annoying other people. Nobody wants. Yeah,
you can spend some time feeling sorry for yourself, with your best friend or something. But then, get back at it. And,
yeah, exactly.
You don't need to dwell on that. I think make whatever changes you need to make. But I think a lot of this is about mindset. And I think if you put your mind to it, you'll find something. I have no doubt you can find something.
I think that's absolutely true. I think often, too, people sometimes overlook professors as a resource. So if there are professors that who like you, that maybe you've gone to office hours, you have some sort of personal relationship with, just go and chat with them. Say, hey, I'm looking for a job. Here's sort of what I'm interested in. Do you have any suggestions? Anybody you think I should talk with? Because that's really the critical piece of information from any informational interview, which is almost what this is with a professor, is who else do you think I should talk to? Do you have a couple of people you can refer me to that might get me closer to this goal? And I think most people are willing to try to come up with a few people for you.
Absolutely. And I think you should think about all of these contacts not as, oh, I know that this person's going to hire me. It's just, I want to get something out of every contact, whether it's a referral to somebody else or, another place I should look or whatever it is. And I think you should be really organized about keeping track of all of this information.
Yes, I was also just about to say that I think this is definitely, Trello would be a great option for this, or a spreadsheet, whatever it is, but you want to keep track of who did I speak with, who did they refer me to, have I made contact with those people, that kind of thing, because this is the sort of thing that it can spiral out of control pretty quickly if you're not being organized about it.
And I will say that if someone, let's say, comes to me, and wants a referral or information, and then I find out that they didn't follow up with that person, that really bothers me.
Yeah, that's super annoying.
So don't lose track of that. I think it's really important. Also, make sure that you've thanked everyone.
Exactly. And so, I think people, if they've given you a contact or they've agreed to meet with you for coffee or whatever, they're sort of invested in you.
Yeah.
So it's really nice to at least keep them updated. I mean, obviously, if you find something, definitely send a thank you email. Hey, I just wanted to thank you for your help in my job search. I just want to let you know I'm going to be working for this organization. I'm really excited about it. Thanks so much. But even if you haven't found that, I think you can still follow up and say, hey, I talked with Susie that you referred me to. She was super nice. I really appreciate it. Because then the person, I might come back if you're thanking me and say, oh, also you should really talk to Beth. Here you go.
Yeah. And maybe you didn't find something and, they appreciate that you follow up. Exactly. And then they give you more options. I remember those people because I think that they're few and far between. Yeah. Most people don't thank you, don't follow up. And you sort of, write them off and you're not going to help them again. So I think it's really important to stand out as, really professional.
Right. It doesn't have to be any big deal. I mean, it can literally be a 2-line email. You just have to think about doing it.
I also really appreciate when people tell me that they got something, just so like kind of close the loop and, oh, that's great. Move on.
Yeah. And then you feel like, oh, great. I had some small part in their success. That's so nice.
Yeah,
It makes you feel good.
Exactly.
And it makes you more likely to help them again.
And be enthusiastic about everything. So, if you get something, it's not the exact right thing, make it sound like it is.
Just pretend. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. This is definitely a fake it till you make it situation. There's really no point in telling people you're not excited about the job you got. You may as well pretend you are.
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, too, if people are really struggling here, this can be a good place to look for outside help. So if you're not feeling supported by your school, look at possibly talking with a career counselor. We can help you with things like this. But I think this is a place to get whatever support you need because it is a really important job.
And I think that can be helpful if you're at this point in the process because something probably wasn't working. So I think it's good to get a new perspective on it and, a fresh perspective and someone maybe who hasn't seen your information before and can kind of look at it and say, okay, here's where I think you should go in a different direction. And I think that you're probably at that point if you don't have a job yet and you're in 2L.
I think that's right. So what if a 2L just can't find anything in the end? Is something like summer school a reasonable option?
It's not my favorite option. I think, if you have to do something, because you can't do nothing, but I would say I would rather have any kind of job, even if it's, unpaid, even if it's not exactly legal related. I personally think that that's better than summer school.
Yeah, I agree. Even if you end up working, say, in like a business setting that's legal adjacent, I mean, that's at least something you can talk about. Summer school just kind of looks like, okay, did you try to get a job and fail? Or did you just not realize that you needed to do this? Like, what is going on here?
There's something off about that. And I think you'll have to explain it for a really long time into the future. And I think that some students don't realize that. It really stands out because everybody gets a 2L job. So I think there's always a way to sell any job as, you can kind of finagle it and, kind of spin it a little bit, like you said, kind of legal adjacent.
Right. And I think, too, you've got to be realistic about whether you're going to get paid at this point. And the answer to that question may be no, which means that, you might need to do something like volunteer to do pro bono work someplace for X number of hours a week, and then also have a job, driving for Uber or working in a coffee shop or dog walking or waitressing, whatever it is. If you need to make money, that's totally legit. But you also need to find something that is getting you legal experience.
I also think they won't necessarily know that it wasn't a full-time, 40-plus hour a week job. So like you said, I think you can kind of adjust what the hours are. And there's so many options these days for side hustles. Yeah. So it's more important to think about your resume and your future and kind of, really cut back on the budget issue.
Yeah, I mean, nobody's going to ask you, did you work 40 hours a week at this position?
No.
I mean, unless you make that obvious that you didn't, which why would you? So, they're just going to assume oh, of course, you worked like a normal schedule. No one needs to know otherwise.
Yeah, I think you just want to think, how are you going to describe what you did? The job responsibilities.
Yeah, exactly. All right, well, that's our scoop on 2Ls. Basically, find something, do your best, be flexible, be positive. Now let's talk about 1Ls, because this is a much more common scenario. So the average 1L listening to this probably does not have a position yet. I mean, great if you do, but why are you listening to this? But probably you do not. So what about 1Ls?
I guess I hope that if you're a 1L and you don't have a job yet, you've at least started to think about it. And probably if you're listening to this, you have. So I hope you've laid a little bit of groundwork and done some networking throughout the semester, and talked to career services and gotten your job documents together. I mean, that would be the basic to me. Make sure that, your resume, your cover letters, your strategy is there. Because that's, the most important thing. And then I think you just want to think about, getting something, that's going to give you some experience. It's less important as a 1L that it's exactly, what you want to do in the future. I think that most employers, when they're looking at 2Ls and they see what they did 1L summer, it's just, something legal related. It doesn't need to be a firm job.
Right, and probably will not be a firm job for most people.
Yeah, exactly. So I think you just want to see that they did something, they gained some experience, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think, common stuff that you would see on a 1L, post 1L resume would be things like working for a judge, which is a great option. You're going to see a lot of stuff. It can help you decide if you might want to do a clerkship, working for some sort of government agency like the public defender or the DA. Those are popular. Working for a public interest organization of some type. I mean, occasionally people get firm jobs. It does happen. I did it. It's really great. But it's pretty rare. And typically that's going to be through your school if you haven't already mass emailed everyone on December 1st, which is passed. So, it's possible if you're at a top school, they might do some interviewing on campus. I think here, the main thing right now is you need to sort of figure out what your options are likely to be in terms of a place to find a job. Is there a career fair, something like that? Are there interviews on campus? Is your career services posting stuff to a mailing list? So that you, like you said, you have a plan for how you're going to move this project forward.
And something I think is really important is that if you want to work in like a certain market and you want to work in that market, I would try to get a 1L job in that market. So especially if it's another city where you don't have another connection, this is crucial.
Yeah, I completely agree.
So I would get anything. So that is like a good thing to focus on if you know.
Yeah, I mean, like I, for example, was in school in New York, and I had a friend there who had never lived in California, but she really wanted to work in San Francisco. So her 1L summer, she really, really hustled and found a small firm in San Francisco. I think it was like, 5 people or something, that was willing to give her a job. And I'm not even sure she got paid for it. But then when she was applying to firm jobs the next summer, the answer to why San Francisco was pretty easy. Like, oh, well, I worked here last summer. I really enjoyed it. Much easier than, oh, I've never set foot there except on vacation.
And firms really notice that. And especially if you don't have a connection, they're like, oh, wow, they found a job there. They live there. Like, that means a lot. And especially, like you say, in a place like San Francisco, where I think that's important that you have a connection.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you've done the groundwork. You understand what it's like to work in that city. It just gives you much more credibility. So, I think whatever job you get, the job itself is probably less than the kind of signaling about some of these other things. And sometimes people worry like, oh, well, what if I think I want to go to BigLaw, but I have to work in a public interest organization? That's not a problem.
That doesn't matter.
Yeah. People are happy actually about that. They're like, oh, great. You can join our pro bono team.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, I don't want to dissuade people. If you know what you want to do and you really want to apply for a 1L job in the area that you want to, that you're sure you want to practice in, I think that's great. Like, I wouldn't say you shouldn't try. I would just say you have to be really open-minded. You're not necessarily going to get something exactly where you want to be.
Yeah, I mean, if you're like, I know that I want to do large firm patent litigation, it's like, okay, well, you're probably not going to do that. It's like after your 1L year. Like, let's be realistic. But, maybe you think more broadly, if you are sure that's what you want, and you think about like, well, are there possible opportunities in like a biotech company or some other company, where I could maybe, work with their general counsel. Like, people might actually be flexible around that if you can sell it to them.
Yeah, in that situation, like anything tech related, I think you're going to be able to make it sound like, you were really interested in that area.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good point.
Yeah, so I think this is a summer to be flexible. The most important thing is you want to be doing some type of legal work, even if it's unpaid, even if it's in an area maybe you're not totally thrilled about. Your school might give you a stipend if you do certain types of work, so that's definitely worth looking into. So again, I think one of your first steps here is go talk with career services. How can they help you? Basically is the question.
And if you're a 1L, make friends with them now. You're going to need them going forward. So this is the time.
Yeah, and they can tell you, with authority, what are the events that might be happening on campus or nearby. Can they help you with your application materials? The more people that look at your resume and cover letter, probably the better it's going to be. They might be able to help you with a writing sample if you need that. They're going to be pretty connected typically to a network of other events in the area. So, like in New York City, for example, I think NYU every year had a public interest career fair that was in the February or March, something like that. So they're going to know that exists, which at this point you might not know.
Absolutely. I also think ahead about recommendations that you need, that kind of thing. Who you're going to use for that, who the connections you have are, all of that. I would, start thinking about that now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just like the 2Ls need to start blocking out time to work on this, you also need to block out time until you find something. Because this is important.
Yeah, I think that what can happen with 1Ls is that they feel like they have a lot of time and you can't do anything before December 1st. So I think you can kind of lose track of it, and it can get late and you don't have anything and then you're feeling a lot of pressure.
Yeah, so at what point in the semester do 1Ls really need to start panicking about this?
Spring break. I would hope you'd have something by then.
Yeah, I think that's a good goal. Basically, if you're into, solidly into March and you still don't really have any options presenting themselves, I think you need to be a little concerned about it. All right. Well, actually, let's talk about that. How can people find these opportunities other than just sort of asking around, which might not be the most efficient approach?
I think that you should definitely look out for anything that Career Services sends out about events. There's things in the NALP directory. I think we've talked about NALP before. It's the professional organization for legal employers, and they have things that they send around. I also think bar associations have a lot of events and things that you can get involved in, even from 1L a year. Just job sites. Things are posted. Things are listed online. I think it's just about kind of casting a wide net.
Yeah, I think that's right. And sometimes people say, oh, well, Career Services, I know they send me all this stuff, but I just don't really look at it. And it's like, yep. Really? Do you realize they're sending you opportunities? I was always
surprised at, how few attendees we'd get for these kind of things. And I think some people, particularly 1Ls, don't realize that these events are a chance to network, even if it's like a talk about something. So it's not specifically, marketed as a job type event, but it's still a chance where they're going to be sending lawyers, to talk to you about something. And that's the point.
Yeah, I think sometimes if there's an area you're interested in and you see that somebody is giving a talk at lunch or something, that can be a great opportunity to go to the talk. And then you can follow up with the person afterwards saying, hey, I was at your talk. I found it really interesting. Either I had a question about this or whatever. You've got to be kind of thinking outside of the box here sometimes. I remember when a friend of mine ended up working his 1L summer somewhere in Eastern Europe because the president had given a talk at the law school and he followed up with him and the guy was like, hey, do you want to come work for me for the summer? And he's like, wow, sure, that sounds fun. It was just one of those
you never know.
Yeah, totally random things that you just never know about.
Another thing is some people work directly with clubs or groups on campus. Mm-hmm. So I think that's another thing to get involved in or see, even if you're not in it, sometimes you can go. So I think there's lots of things that might be advertised if you're really looking for it.
Yeah, and I think if you're a 1L listening to this, one great way to network with people is to get yourself on the board of some type of club, which is very easy because they're always looking for people to be vice president of, the Sports Law Association or whatever. But what you can do is then you get to organize events. And so that's a great way to reach out to people that you want to network with saying, hey, we'd love to have you come and speak on campus. Would you be interested? perfect networking opportunity. People love to feel important.
Absolutely. And I think firms or even, other kind of public interest jobs, government, people, they love to be involved in law school and get their name out there. So I think, they really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's kind of a win-win. Definitely get yourself on the board. It looks good on your resume. It makes you look involved. You don't really have to do very much typically. You get to control a budget, so you can decide what kind of beer you're going to have at the party. There's really no downside. I was on the board of 7 organizations.
I was going to say, I don't think it's a lot of work. No,
but it looks good.
I think, yeah, absolutely.
And you do get to throw parties, which, why not spend money for, your friends to come and hang out?
And I think that employers really like the idea that you took initiative. You were just in a club. You
were the VP.
We're on the leadership. Exactly.
Basically
whatever that means.
Yeah. Also, one thing people may overlook is whether your undergraduate institution has any option. So, I'm constantly, or a different graduate school. I'm constantly getting emails from different alumni associations from the many schools I've attended saying, hey, we have this or we have that. But, that might be a great opportunity to get something that's not so obvious, so not as many people are applying for it.
Yeah, I think some people forget that because they're just thinking, oh, that wasn't my law school, but you're an alumni, so you have
you're an alum, and probably a lot of people that you went to undergrad with also went to law school. They might not have gone to your law school, but that's great because that is actually, a weak tie. And those weak ties are really actually what typically get people jobs because it's a different network that you may not be aware of.
Definitely. I think, open it up and kind of think outside the box. Don't just pick the obvious, things.
Right. How many people are applying for that 1L firm position at your school? Probably a lot of them. Maybe you get it, but your odds are not that amazing. If you do get an interview for a 1L position, I will say from my experience, I think the thing that gets people those positions more than anything, well, grades, but assuming you've got the interview, your grades are sufficiently high, they're interested, is really being very outgoing and the type of person who they think would talk up that firm, because that's really what they're looking for.
Yeah, I think law students may not always realize that that is the point of having a 1L. Usually they're kind of described as 1L ambassadors.
Right.
So most firms don't expect their 1Ls to come back and work there. So it's sort of a different situation than a 2L. They might, but that's not the goal. The goal, exactly what you said, is for them to go back and, talk up the firm. So you want to make sure that, being involved in organizations and being, an outgoing person is, the most important thing.
Yeah, they're really looking for a cheerleader, someone who, when that 2L comes to them who's considering taking the job, you're like, oh, the place was amazing. They were fantastic. I loved working there. You should definitely commit. I certainly, the firm I worked at my first summer, I know for a fact that I got them several people, and I did like them. They were great.
I think 1Ls can be, a great marketing tool for firms. So you want to make sure that they know that's who you are.
Yeah. So the more you can play up, I was organizing this and doing this and whatever, that's kind of what they're looking for. All right. Well, we are running short on time. I guess my key takeaway here is it's really important to be realistic in this process and not be too picky, right? You need to find something as a 1L. You don't have to find the perfect job.
Absolutely. I think the idea is just what you said, that it needs to be something, and it needs to be something where you'll be able to describe it as good experience. And I think that is sort of broad. I think you can make a lot of things, sound like a certain thing. Going
any
into
job,
2L interviewing.
Presumably you're going to learn something in any job, even if it's not your perfect position.
I think the goal, what we said for both 1Ls and 2Ls, though, is it should be a job, and it should be, legal related. I don't think that summer school or taking some time off or whatever else, alternatives you're thinking are a good idea. I think it needs to be something So, the last thing you want is some kind of hole in your resume.
Yeah, I've sometimes had people say, oh, well, I was just so tired after my 1 year. I just decided to take a break. It's like, that was a bad decision.
There's no way you're going to be able to explain that.
Yeah, it just looks super weird.
Yeah, I also think that you can find something. I think that's what you need to keep in mind. If you have your eye on the prize, you can find something.
Yeah, and this is a good opportunity to explore an area maybe you have some interest in, you're not sure you immediately want to work in it. I mean, the reality is, even if you think you're going into big law, most people leave those jobs in the first 3 to 5 years. So the question is, well, what do you do after that? And then if you have something that you were all interested in all along on your resume, it might make it easier to actually go back to that and say, well, I went to law school because I wanted to do X, and so I worked there my first summer, and then, I had loans, I went to this, law firm, whatever, but now I kind of want to come back to my original passion. That's a great story.
Absolutely. And as we've talked about before, this is the time to think about your story. You're building it. So, exactly. Just think about how it's going to flow down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. Any final thoughts on this?
Get a job.
Yeah, basically, get out there.
Don't give up.
Don't give up. Find something. You can find something. All right. Well, unfortunately, we are out of time. For more career help and the opportunity to work one-on-one with us, including helping you find a summer job, you can check out careerdicta.com. If you enjoyed this episode of the Law School Toolbox podcast, please take a second to leave a review or rating on your favorite listening app because we would really appreciate it. And be sure to subscribe so you don't miss anything. If you have any questions or comments, please don't hesitate to reach out to Lee and Alison at lee@lawschooltoolbox.com or allison@lawschooltoolbox.com, or you can always contact us via our website contact form at lawschooltoolbox.com. Thanks for listening. We'll talk soon, and good luck with your summer job search.